We are joined now by our international correspondent, Alex Newman. Alex, thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you, Duke.
You have a couple of really important stories, and I wanted to take time on this Friday to make sure that we get both of the stories covered. The first one is this ridiculous Build Back Better bill, which has so much garbage in it that it's all the Republicans who sold out for this really should pay a huge price, as big a price as the Democrats ought to pay in the next election cycle. I don't know that it will happen, but we have to try to make it happen. Give us one very particular side effect of Build Back Better that has to do with the American preschool movement.
Yeah, unfortunately, this Build Back Better monstrosity, this abomination that is working its way through Congress right now, is going to radically expand pre-kindergarten, and it's going to take over the existing architecture of pre-kindergarten. Right now across the country, there is a huge network of pre-K providers. Typically, these are churches, religious institutions. Some of them get some state funding, local funding. A lot of it is private. Well, the federal government is planning to nationalize all that with this Build Back Better monstrosity. It would deliberately discriminate against religious providers. And the purpose is very clear here. They want to push more and more moms back into the workforce and get more and more little children into these radicalized indoctrination centers masquerading as pre-Ks so that they can teach them critical race theory and they can teach them global warming and they can teach them gender theory. They're talking universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-old children. And by universal, yes, they mean everyone. It's not mandatory yet, but they're building the architecture to force us all to hand over our kids even younger.
And that's what I wanted to clarify. So they are not requiring it, but they're going to pay for it. So anybody who chooses to enter their pre-K system will get free. It'll be quote unquote free, right? They won't have to pay for it. And that's why there will be a huge drain on the private and religious ones, or is there something else going on?
Well, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Yeah. So the government will fund all of this. Now, ultimately, they're going to get the states to fund it as well. But they use the same trick that Washington, D.C. always uses. They offer to fund it up front, and then the states have to come in and make up the funding later, years down the line, once the system is entrenched. The lobbyists are there, the associations and the trade groups are there. And so what this does is it sends huge amounts. We're talking more than $200 billion, Duke. I mean, this number is astronomical. I mean, the federal budget wasn't $200 billion just a few decades ago. Now we're talking $200 billion to fund this universal program. And what it is going to do is it's going to bankrupt and destroy all of the existing religious ones. And this is being talked about even by establishment analysts. They're openly saying that this is going to destroy the existing child care institutions and pre-K that churches and synagogues and so on are operating all across the country. And right now, it really does look like this bill is going to pass through the Senate in some form. So it's another example of the out of control insanity coming out of D.C. But this is even more significant because, again, they're targeting tiny little children for brainwashing.
Yeah, and this is the depressing aspect of this is that once those kids are in those these government-sponsored pre-K cults, basically, it's going to be a lot harder for moms and dads than after the ages of 3 and 4 to pull out and go back to homeschooling or other things. It's just one more way you're going to bait parents to see this as ultimately free babysitting.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what they did with public schools. Now they're moving it down to pre-K, and the implications of this are terrible. And we've known this was the agenda all along. Aaron Russo, the famous Hollywood documentary and filmmaker, was good friends with the Rockefellers, and he said the Rockefellers told him they were laughing about how they funded the women's liberation movement as really a scam to get more women in the workforce so they'd have more people to tax and so that they could get kids at younger and younger ages to brainwash them in the government's care. So this is another massive step forward in that direction. It's going to be one of those permanently entrenched programs, right? There's not going to be any going back. And unfortunately, it's going to come at the expense of parents. And what they're doing, they're going to have to raise our taxes to pay for all this, providing even more incentive so that, a single husband can't afford to support the family anymore without the wife going out to work. So it's a scheme that they're doing. It's going to look like Scandinavia eventually, where they deliberately engineered the system this way. It must be resisted, but they're already bragging in Congress about this is one of the most significant things Congress has ever done. It's an atrocity, Duke.
Yeah, and all that with the knowledge that pre-K doesn't really help academic progress for kids. In fact, there's evidence that may harm them emotionally. Way to go, America. Bye.